Hey guys, welcome to 2717. On today's podcast, we're going to have a MMA Hall of Famer. If you don't know what MMA means, stay tuned.
At 17, it is Merritt Vaughn, my brother from another mother, Wade Hagler. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, brother.
Hey, today we got a special treat. We have my good buddy, Chris Brennan. Welcome. Everybody welcome, Chris. We're going to talk about Chris, but if you're in the UFC MMA game, this is going to be a fun podcast for you. But we're going to talk about how do you build a champion, like the idea of championships. Chris has been around. Become a champion, is a champion. He's got boys now that are champions. He's training fighters that are champions. And, you know, I think, look, whatever you're called to do, whatever you're trying to be a champion at, I think we're all trying to get to that level. So today should be fun. Chris,
I'm excited. Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah. Wait.
Yeah, no, this is right up my wheelhouse. You know, I grew up around a lot of guys, and before we started recording, we were talking about some of the dudes that were in the UFC from Amarillo, Texas.
Yep.
And Evan Tanner, one of them, which was a champion. You said you got some crazy stories of Heath Herring in Japan, and then Paul Woodatello, the headhunter. And so, these guys were younger than me. Well, Evan Tanner was the same age, but some of these guys were younger than me. But growing up in a town that was a big wrestling town, these guys kind of evolved, and we had the shoot fights, and we had one of the Gracies come and fight in Amarillo one time, and so I've been around this my whole life. Never at a level even close to what you and your family do. But I love the striking aspect of it. And, I mean, you were a 3-time world champion no-gi.
In jiu-jitsu, yes.
In jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So, I mean, guys, if you know anything about sports, it's literally winning the Super Bowl, the World Series, in whatever, in baseball, right? I mean,
right.
The guys are best in the world. I mean, literally the best of the world. Not just once, not twice, 3 times.
Yeah. Incredible.
I mean, just insane. So we literally have a legend sitting here. And by the way, he is in the MMA Hall of Fame. So, I'm geeking out right now.
That's okay.
Because there's so much I could talk about with this dude.
Well,
it's freaking awesome. I'm just so pumped to be here. And we're in his gym here in Frisco. And the gym is just sick. I mean, you just walk in here and you just smell the testosterone, man.
Oh, yeah.
Straight killers. But you build champions, Chris, and you've built champions.
Do my best to.
Yeah, amen. And you built champions in your kids, and we're going to unpack a lot of different things in your journey. By the way, that podcast, what was the name of it?
The Lights Out podcast.
Lights Out.
Yeah, Chris Lytle's.
If you like anything about this, go listen to his journey, because there's no way we could do all of it justice. But this guy trained with Hoist Gracie when the Gracie family brought their style here to the U.S. in California, and developed from that, and then created the Beverly Hills BJJ, right?
Yep. Me and a guy named Mark Lehman. A lot of people know Mark. He was Johnny Hendricks' coach for a long time in the UFC. He was also a multiple-time coach on The Ultimate Fighter. Guys brought him as the coaches.
Yeah.
We lived together, and we left the Gracie Academy on the same day with the guy, Avi Rubin, who opened Beverly Hills.
Yeah. Was he the guy that said, "Hey, guys, I'm rich"?
Yeah, he was the guy. There was a lot of us. There was a guy named Ethan Milius. Ethan Milius, you would know his father, John Milius, who he was a creator of Apocalypse Now, Big Wednesday, a lot of movies, big movie guy.
Yeah.
We all kind of took off at the same time and drove around looking for a building, and this guy finds a building in Beverly Hills. I'm like, bro, it's Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
He's no problem.
I'm rich. Yeah.
that's awesome.
He was.
So how old were you whenever you actually had like your first either boxing or striking or,
I didn't even start training until I was 21. I watched UFC 1 on TV at a bar that I was bouncing at called Margaritaville in Huntington Beach or Newport Beach, California. And we watched it on TV. And I'd always been fighting.
Yeah.
I grew up fighting, but nothing organized until that day we watched that. I sought out gym, started training the very next day.
Yeah.
And within the year, I found out that Hoist was actually in Torrance, which was not that far. It was an hour away, 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
And so I started training there.
So I heard you talk about something where you kind of step in a ring and box, and some 16-year-old kid just smashes your nose. Man,
Seneca, never forget that kid's name. It was the only time I ever met him. I'll never forget his name. Yeah, it was real fast. I think he might not even have been 16. I was 21, and I didn't go in, as far as I remember and believe, I didn't go in like some guys come in my gym. I wasn't arrogant. I just said I wanted to fight in the UFC. You know, I want to fight in the UFC, and I understand what that sounds like now, but there was also guys in the gyms hadn't been around as long as I have now to understand that the UFC was brand new, you know, so it wasn't like they knew a whole lot about it either. So that was my thing. I wanted to, and I didn't want to do it tomorrow. I wanted to do whatever it was going to take to get to that point, you know? And, so the guy's like, okay, you know, and I'm in a small gym, like a little bit bigger than the upstairs of this room, and a boxing ring. And it was called South Coast Martial Arts. And I got in the ring with this kid named Seneca, and I thought we were, you know, sparring.
Yeah.
And I guess we were sparring. He was just much better at sparring than I was. And within 15 seconds or less, my nose is, you know, everywhere. And my septum was deviated so bad. That was literally the only time in my entire career that I got hit in the nose hard like that, and deviated my septum so bad. 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, right before I got sick, I finally got it fixed. But I fought my entire career with my mouth open.
What?
Yeah,
Wow.
I couldn't afford to get surgery. I literally fought my whole career with
From
my
your
mouth
first
open
time from stepping in a ring,
from day one.
and this kid just lights you up. Wow.
And like, if you looked at my nose before that, it looked like I had 3 holes in my nose because my septum was so far over to my right side. And it's crazy.
But I think what's interesting about this, though, is you got thrown in there. This happens to you, but you came right back.
Oh, the next day.
Yeah.
The next day.
Making of a champion.
So I got a question for you. Let's back up just a minute. You're a 6th degree jiu-jitsu black belt, MMA Hall of Fame, 3-time. Tell us a little bit about you, and because I mean you've accomplished a lot in your life, and just some of the things, you know, we're talking about a making of a champion. Tell us, kind of walk us through a little bit of that, and maybe some of the progression on how all that's kind of happened in your life.
From what stage? How old?
Well, yeah. So I mean, you know, when did you get into jiu-jitsu? When did you become your first black belt?
So I was a troublemaker growing up, and I mentioned before we started here, I had dropped out of school in 9th grade, surfing every day. I was doing drugs at the time every single day. And from 14, 15, and 16 years old every day.
Yeah.
And I stopped doing that, started bodybuilding. I came across, I was walking by a gym, and this kid I didn't know his name then, but his name is Sean Westover. He was working out, and I was on my way to a girl's house with an ounce of cocaine in my pocket.
Wow.
And there was a half door, and the top door was open. And I stopped and looked in, and I'm looking at this kid, and he's jacked, you know, and for whatever reason, he comes over and talks to me for like 3 minutes and tells me he's a wrestler, and he wrestles at Mission Viejo High School. Mission Viejo High School. And I was like, that's awesome, you know, whatever. I don't even remember. I thank you. And I walked away, and I threw it in the gutter. Like, I had $1,000 worth of cocaine in my pocket. I threw it in the gutter. Never did coke again in my life. And I had done it every single day to extremes to get it. We could get it at a different time, but every single day for 3 years, threw it away, never did it again. Went back to that gym the next day, got a gym membership. Somehow never saw him again. And then started bodybuilding, started competing in bodybuilding. Once I grew, I was tiny. I was 125 pounds, I think, and started bodybuilding.
I wrestled 119 my senior year.
Yeah.
We got a lot in common.
My son wrestled 106 through high school, and now he's wrestling 174. He's 193 pounds this morning.
Wow.
Anyway, I went from bodybuilding into bouncing. Well, I was bouncing because I was big. The UFC was on, and I was hooked after that. And again, I had a job. I didn't have a career.
Right.
You know, I had no direction. And I just went all in. I found something that, I know it sounds stupid now, but guys were fighting. They were not getting arrested. They were not, they were getting paid.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
it was a sport of sorts at the time.
Yeah.
And I was all in.
Yeah.
And, you know, fortunately, just to circle back, about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, it had been close to 30 years, or over 30 years, I found Sean Westover online.
No way.
And I messaged him and wrote him this thing just saying, hey, you won't remember me, you know, because it was a blip in your, you know, short conversation. He's a Mormon guy lives in Utah.
Yeah.
And his family, his kids had actually followed me already.
Wow.
And on social media.
Well,
And I told him the story. He said he was in tears reading it. I can imagine, because if someone like you could, and he was only a year old,
Right.
1 grade higher than me. When I was talking to him, he was 30. You know what I mean? Like,
For sure.
and so when I was able to tell him, you know, how much the direction of my life changed from that 3 minutes that he made me, you know, and I'm sure he's done it to other people. But for me, I look back at being not famous, but pseudo, you know, people know who I am.
Sure.
For me, I'm able to do that to thousands of people,
That's what I was going to say.
you know?
yeah.
So it's been, I always try to, you know, every once in a while I'll still have a short fuse with somebody, or, you know, I try not to, but I always try to make sure I give everyone the response, you know, that guy gave me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So just to connect the dots. So you went straight into jiu-jitsu training when you went in. That was the first martial arts that you focused on and just started advancing in that.
So I went in to the same gym I got punched in the face in and split my nose. There was a guy named William Holland, a Jeet Kune Do guy, very crazy striker. I trained with him for a long time, and there was a jiu-jitsu guy there. I did jiu-jitsu classes with him and was just doing it, you know, as often as I could until I found the Gracie Academy was there. And then I started training at the Gracie Academy. This guy was a short, jacked Asian dude, the Bill Holland guy. And I trained with him for years, and then we disconnected for years. I went to the UFC. I came back to train with him for my UFC fight. He was still scared the crap out of me every single time. He was the fastest, strongest, most explosive guy still to this day that I ever trained with. Wow. It was wild.
Gosh.
Yeah, he was just insane. And he was built like, I wish I could remember the guy's name, who's an actor, Asian, in all the martial arts movies, but he was built like this cute, balding, but with a ponytail on the back.
Yeah.
It was just a killer. And until the last day I trained him, he was always something that scared the crap out of me.
Wow. That's awesome.
So I don't know if our viewers really understand the dynamic of the Gracie Academy. So if you're watching, look up Hoist Gracie, world famous. You know, there's maybe
One of the original OGs.
Yeah. There might be some controversy of, you know, who had the first, you know, jiu-jitsu, you know.
But it doesn't even matter what the controversy is. He's the guy that put everyone that's still doing it on the map.
That's right.
He gave everyone that opportunity
Yeah.
by jumping in the cage the first time.
Yeah.
So you literally are training under him.
Yeah.
For
We were
years.
Yeah. And
So you rolled around on the mat with him?
yeah, and he used to give me 5 minutes a day. He was obviously much better. I was a blue belt at the time, and he was gone a lot.
Mhm.
And Horian was the owner of the gym, his older brother, and we didn't vibe. You know, he freaked out because I was going to fight Pat Miletich, and
Who's another, you know, legend.
super legend, 5-time UFC champion.
Yeah.
But there couldn't be anybody else fighting out of that gym or academy besides Hoist.
Oh,
They only wanted one
Yeah.
champion.
Well, yeah, and they wanted to continue to monopolize on what they were doing.
sure.
And I get it. You know, that's what they came here for, and they succeeded.
Yes.
You know, but at the same time, I was very fast, and I want to say it's because I didn't go to school. I was very fast at picking up on things.
Yeah.
Fast. You know, I saw what they were doing, and I'm watching them teach. Hori was a phenomenal teacher. You know, he was an attorney as well, spoke well. His kids are here and then hitter. who went on Shark Tank and was better salesman than the people on the show. And they made a $500,000 deal with a backpack that turns into a sweatshirt.
Wow.
But they're fantastic. They run the police departments all over the United States now with their law enforcement stuff that they teach.
Yeah.
And so I always listen to him teach.
Yeah.
They were terrible teachers as far as they didn't show you anything. They're going to show you the minimum that they can show you, but their breakdown of it was fantastic.
Okay.
And so I studied the way he was teaching. Even after I knew I wanted to leave, I studied and I sat in every single class. I was in the instructor program there. So you had to be in class. You had to clean the mats. You had to clean the bathrooms. You had to do the laundry. You had to be there from 9 to 9 with a couple hour break in the middle of the day. And
you had to pay them.
And it was $600 a month to do that.
Wow.
So me and Mark Lehman are living in a Days Inn hotel, paid $600 a month in rent, took the furniture out and just matted the whole living room. And we trained in there every day as well.
Oh my God.
But we're paying, $600. So you have to be there 9 to 9. So you can't have a job, but you also have to be able to pay them. So it was a tough time, but I got everything I needed out of it because as much as they were using us, I was using them. I was learning and learning and learning.
Yeah.
So when I left there, I never had a coach after that. I was on my own from blue belt on.
Wow.
And I even went to Brazil with a white belt on because I didn't want to show up like the cocky American. And I got my blue belt first day I was there training.
Yeah.
So my blue belt was legit. I just wasn't sure after, being here and being there.
Yeah.
So, I went all in from that point. I guess circling back to how to get started. That was how I got started. And it was, for me, I saw an opportunity to make a living. And at teaching, not fighting, I was somehow bright enough to know, okay, I'm going to fight. And you can probably fight for this long and make money. But what?
Yeah.
So I think I only had 3 fights before I opened my first gym, 4 fights before I opened my first gym. And I took the money. So I fought a couple times here in some garbage shows, went to Brazil. I packed 4 duffel bags, flew to Brazil and lived there for a year. I slept on the mats in the gym for a year. When I got back, I went to Beverly Hills. John Peretti was there, who was a guy who was the matchmaker for the UFC at the time.
Yeah.
He hits me up and tells me that they're thinking about doing a lightweight tournament. So I end up fighting Pat Miletich. 2 months later, I fight Pat Miletich again. 2 months later is the UFC, and they asked me to fight. So I fight, win my first fight. He fights, wins his first fight. Me and him fight for the UFC belt. In the tournament that night. And I was an alternate, but I knew I was getting in. And John Peretti comes running down the hall. Chris Brennan, start warming up.
Is this when you said you were eating a hot dog or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I'm in the stands. My fight was over. I didn't, we weren't sure it was up. And then I'm watching the fight take place that I would replace. And I knew neither one of these guys were continuing. So I started hustling back downstairs. And at the time I get down there, Peretti's running down the hall. Chris Brennan, warm up. So I start warming up, not even knowing who I'm fighting. And then all of a sudden I'm like, am I fighting Pat? Yeah, like I'm fighting Pat, right? He won. Oh, man. And it sucked. For me, I had, I don't mean to jump ahead.
No, you're fine, man. Go ahead.
For me, I had my life goal at that time was to hear John McCarthy say, "Are you ready? Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Let's get it on."
Yeah.
And I get in the cage, and it was bigger than that. He says, "This is for the lightweight championship. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get on." I was just like, oh. So I had just fought this guy to a 20-minute draw, a 30-minute split decision, 1 round, 30 minutes straight.
Wow.
And okay, hold on, just real fast for our viewers. UFC is championship rounds are 5
minute rounds.
5-minute rounds.
Normal fights are 3 5-minute rounds.
Yeah, so
We fought straight 30 minutes with no break in between. No
30 minutes of straight fight.
That's
Your average bar fight might take 30 seconds, and the guys are gassed out. About to puke.
Yeah.
30 minutes. Okay, so keep going. Sorry.
So as the fight started, I literally was like, for whatever reason, just zapped of like, I did everything. I had too many micro goals, I guess, or macro goals and not enough micro goals. And as soon as that happened, I was like, I've done everything. And I did well. We fought, I think, for 10 minutes, and I ended up getting choked against the cage with his forearm in the cage because he could hold the cage at the time.
Oh,
And I was just like, man, this guy he wasn't close for 40 minutes of beating me or finishing me.
yeah.
And then I just lost to, in 15 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever it was, and got finished. And I was just like, oh, and I was only a blue belt at the time. It goes white, blue,
Right.
purple, brown, black. I was a blue belt at the time. He was a college wrestler with a gold gloves boxing background, already pretty solid at jiu-jitsu, not as good as mine, but his top pressure and wrestling was made the difference at that point in time. And I had been on bottom with him every fight at some point because of his wrestling. And so I fought one more wrestler after him, and I was like, okay, I didn't steer away from jiu-jitsu, but my jiu-jitsu game became heavily wrestling influenced. And now everyone thinks I wrestled because of the way I grapple, but I didn't. My wrestling or my jiu-jitsu game was just wrestling heavy. And I made sure that once my kids started doing jiu-jitsu, they were going to wrestle, so they could be wrestlers, and they are definitely that.
That's awesome.
Hey, man.
So your nickname, we got to hear the story, is the Westside Strangler, right? So tell us, how'd you get that name?
Did you hear that story or no?
Is this with Tito?
Yeah.
Ortiz?
Yeah.
So I don't know why I'm cornering Tito Ortiz. I knew Tito from Huntington Beach, and I had trained with him before, but I don't know why he didn't have his corner with him or his guys. He had one guy, and me and someone else was in his corner when he fought Guy Mesger the second time when he beat him up. And I think we were in like Biloxi, Mississippi or something like that, Alabama maybe. And Tito, can I cuss?
Of course. Yeah, go for it.
Tito finishes the fight, and he puts on a t-shirt that says, "Gay Metzger is my bitch."
Oh my God.
And Ken Shamrock freaks out. He's coming over the top of the cage, and Tito's going at him, and John McCarthy grabs Tito by the waist and yanks him back. And we're jumping over, trying to stop everything and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And he was taunting him so bad that they freaked out. And Ken Shamrock is a hothead.
Yeah.
Okay. So we exit the cage, we go to the back, and we end up in a room that is like 10 by 6, maybe.
Small room.
We're in there. My buddy Jeremy's in there. Jeremy Horn is in there. And someone else from Pat Militich's side, because Jeremy's with Pat.
Yeah.
And we're locked in this room because all of the Lions and guys are outside, but for some reason, also so are the Hammer House guys. That's like Mark Coleman, Kevin Randleman, and all those
They
guys.
were after y'all too?
They were just with the other side, and I don't
Too much.
And I'm like,
Straight to
bro, I didn't come here to corner Tito.
Right.
I'm just cornering Tito. Like I got asked
I'm
to
not getting
corner him.
myself in the middle of this thing.
Right. So we're stuck in this thing, and I don't want to exaggerate, but I want to say we're locked in the screen for almost a couple hours.
Wow.
And
The cops locked y'all in. Or do y'all lock yourself?
no, the cops I don't think were there yet. I'm not sure why security maybe locked us in there.
Yeah.
And then the cops came.
Because there's like 20 guys out there that
Yeah.
are all UFC fighters
Right.
that want to kill y'all.
So we get escorted back across, and it's only across the parking lot to the hotel, but we get in a shuttle bus and get escorted across, and they're on the other side.
No, yeah.
And I look at my buddy Jeremy, who's with me, and I said, and Mikey Burnett is the guy from Lions Den who's my size.
Right.
I said, well, if all this pops off, I'm fighting Mikey Burnett. and my buddy Jeremy goes, oh, bro. He goes, that'd be crazy. The East Side Assassin versus the Westside Strangler. Because at that time I had choked I was always choking everybody. I hadn't hit the Kimura thing yet. And I was choking everybody, and I was from Compton.
Yeah.
And he goes, the Westside Strangler. Mikey's nickname was the East Side Assassin.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
So I was like, oh, yeah, that's a great one. And it stuck.
It's done.
From that day forward, that was my name.
That's hilarious.
So did y'all ever have to fight the guys?
No.
Okay, you're able to get out.
Security came. This was crazy. Security came, cops came. They kind of broke everyone up, sent everyone up. Tito went upstairs.
Yeah.
And he got a bag, and he came downstairs and jumped on a bus and went on tour with Korn.
Oh gosh.
and left us.
Wow.
Yeah, it was wild.
That's awesome.
What a crazy story.
I'd like to hear about your jiu-jitsu training centers. I mean,
Well, I want to ask the question. So you're this MMA fighter, a world champion, no-gi jiu-jitsu. When did you make that transition? And I asked you this a little bit pre-recording, so I kind of know how you're going to answer or you're going to start the answer. But where did you say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur?
yeah, there you go.
And you and I share a lot in common because I didn't graduate high school. You didn't graduate high school. But yet we both became, pretty successful in our industries.
Sure.
So where did that mind shift happen for you?
It's a good question.
And then walk us along that journey.
Right. So, like I said, I had dropped out of high school in 9th grade. I had jobs, I bounced. I did construction with my dad for the first 4 years after I dropped out. And my parents weren't awesome. And so when I dropped out at 14, they're like, okay, you just need to work. Like, who lets their kid at 14 drop out?
Yeah.
Like, what do I know?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it tells me to go to work. Looking back, the only reason I would say I'm glad it happened is because I would definitely not end up on the path that I took.
Yeah.
And I love where I'm at. But it would have been, that's the one thing I tell my kids the truth about everything.
Yeah.
But not until Luke was a senior and Tyler was a junior did I tell them I didn't graduate from high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want them to think that they could do this without it. Whether they could or couldn't.
Right.
I want them to finish.
My kids didn't find out until a few years back. They're 25 and 22. Similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was watching, like I was talking about the Gracie Academy and them teaching and whatnot. And I thought, man, one day Hoist came downstairs and he told everybody to take the gi off. And we're just going to go in gi pants, open hand strikes, no shirt. That was a purple belt and a brown belt at the time who would beat me regularly in the gi. They were good. And we took off the gi and I just kind of ran over everybody.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is, I fought already. I'd already been fighting. This is natural for me. This is what I like. I'm not going to wear the gi in a fight, right? So then I'm thinking to myself, and the Brazilians try to convince me and everybody else forever that you need the gi to get good at jiu-jitsu. And I'm thinking, every single time you grab a pant leg, every single time you grab a sleeve, every single time you grab the collar, the lapel, you're creating a habit of grabbing those things that are not going to be there when the gi comes off.
Yeah.
So I started training my gi stuff without grabbing, I was doing everything without it. And then I thought to myself, man, I would love to own a gym, like this, not this, but like the one they had at the time. It was beautiful. And, but I'm thinking much smaller, but it would be great, but all would be no gi.
Yeah.
Were there any no-gi gyms in California?
I was the first one ever.
You were the first one?
Yeah, ever.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, this is so cool.
So 98, I get my UFC fight and lose in the finals, but make 10 grand. I come home, open a gym. All no-gi.
Yeah.
And I had a guy with me, Roger Brooking, who's a Brazilian guy that I brought back from Brazil to train with me. And he was training me every day in my garage. We were training every day. I was getting privates. And I got him a job so that he could stay. And we just worked every day. We were going to open the gym together. And he was going to teach, gi. I was at Toby. Well, I told him I wanted it all to be no-gi. And that as strongly as all the Brazilians were against it back then, he didn't want to be partners anymore. And I had to open by myself.
Wow.
He was a brown belt. So I was a blue belt, which wasn't anything at the time. I opened my first gym
As a blue belt.
with zero business background, with zero anything.
Right. Remember, we're talking about making him a champion. But
what happened was that night I fought and lost. The very next morning I'm home and I pull up to the traffic light and this dude, hey, and I rolled down one. He goes, "Did you fight in the UFC last night?" And I said, "Yeah, man." I go, "Sorry, I didn't win the finals." He goes, "No, it was awesome. You're whatever." And I drove. I was like, "Man, that's crazy. One day I I can do this. So I went and opened my gym, and it ended up being a gym for me and 3 of my buddies that get really good at training in, and with like 6 students. And I was in a place that was like $4,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
And I lasted about 6 months and ended up back in my garage.
Yeah.
And so especially because I was all Nogi, like it was just no one was doing Nogi,
Right.
zero. And so I went back to my garage. I matted my garage in my apartment complex. I had an enclosed garage and started teaching out of my garage. And I ended up having 65, 70 students in my garage.
You're kidding.
No. So then I opened another gym, a cheaper place. And I really, paid attention to learning my lessons on the first place. Yeah. And I still made mistakes. I was married at the time. She helped a lot, with stuff. But I grinded and grinded and grinded. And
You outworked everybody.
yep. And that was the only gym I closed. And just any failures were failing forward.
Yeah.
Every time. And I had nothing else. Right. So I was going to be successful one way or the other. I was going to be successful. I then got married, then had kids. Then I'm 100% going to be successful.
Yeah.
I'm not going back now.
Yeah.
And just continued to grow forward.
Yeah. So in it perfectly, I'm glad for backing this up. So tell us about Frisco and Denver and Laguna Hill, and tell us all these different places you have.
So while I'm in California, I have a big gym, 5,000 square foot, nice gym, and it's got 2 bedrooms in it. So I started having guys, not having them, they started coming over from Ireland, from England. John Kavanagh, who's Conor McGregor's coach,
Yep.
he came over to stay and train at my gym.
Wow.
This other guy, Paul Rimmer, who's now the owner of my Liverpool gym, he's Patty Pimblett's coach.
Yeah.
Patty, he's Molly McCann's coach.
That's awesome.
They train out of my gym there. And so they were coming over, and then I went back over there and was teaching seminars. And then they just end up, affiliating, opening a gym. The same thing happened with my guys in Dublin, Ireland, and in Ballymena, which is up by Belfast in Northern Ireland.
I'm in there.
And it just kind of grew a lot, and the more I did gym wise and competition wise, the more the word of mouth got out there and the more people wanted to affiliate. And then, I've got 3 gyms here in Texas, my gym, and then 2 affiliates. I've got an affiliate in Denver, Colorado, 1 in Orange County, California, 2 in Ireland, 2 in England. And there's just, before I got sick a few years ago, I'd been going to the Europe gyms, a couple times a year, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. And it's
awesome. Here's what he got excited. He got fired up. He had 10 grand, went in, first thing didn't work. Sometimes you fail, right? Goes back to his garage, builds up another group of students, 60 something students, opens up a gym, and now has gyms all over the world, here in the United States. I mean, so again, we're talking about the making of a champion. I mean, you may fail, you may be working out of your garage. That's okay. Just don't give up.
Yeah.
Fighting it.
When I moved to Texas in 2006, I didn't open a gym until 2011. And so I was just training. I was still fighting. I was doing strength conditioning training for motocross riders at the same time. I was making good money doing that. And Paul Rimmer, the Liverpool gym, he was carrying the weight. He was keeping the NG alive.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. And then I opened my gym here. So I opened my gym across the street in I think like a 2,000 square foot building.
Yeah.
And I was looking at this building was empty already. I was looking in the windows all the time.
This building, beautiful, by the way.
Yeah.
The outside of this is insane.
Yeah. And it's 9,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And I'm looking through the window all the time thinking, oh my God, let's do that. And I may have already been divorced. I don't remember, but we're close. And she's like, don't do it. Don't do it. No, not right now. Like she's been there before, she's been there for all of it.
Yeah.
And she goes, now start there. And I was like, okay, you don't even know what it's going to be like in Texas, what the following is going to be like. I said, you're right. So I went over there, opened a gym. Within 6 or 7 months, I'm looking back here and I'm like, hey, so then I started talking to these people And then I think it took us probably 2 months to build this out. So the last 2 months of that lease, I'm already in this building.
Yeah.
And we're now have, over 500 members in this gym.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
That's cool.
It's amazing. You mentioned something, Chris. You said you got really sick. Tell us about that. Walk us through that.
So 3 years ago, just this last month, I got sick with COVID. Me and Lucas had just gotten home from one of his fights.
Your son.
Yep. And I was his training partner every day for his fights up until that point.
Yeah.
And I was in great shape. And I was, I think, 2 months, month and a half away from turning 50.
Yeah.
And I could not wait to post my 50-year-old picture. I was jacked. I was lean.
Yeah.
I was ready to go. And we got COVID, and he even gotten pretty bad, but I got it real bad. And I had a pulse ox already, because I would put that on Lucas in between rounds and watch his heart rate drop and see what his blood oxygen levels were. And so I had one, I put it on, and my oxygen was dropping into the 80s. So I'm like, crap. So I went to the hospital, and they put me on oxygen. They, kept me there for 4 or 5 hours, sent me home. And then I'm at home, and I'm coughing up coughing up a lung. And then I went back to the hospital, and I'm panicking. And because my oxygen still do the same thing. And I was there for a few hours, and they sent me home. And then the following day, I went back again, because my oxygen was staying in the 80s, and they kept me, put me in. I was on oxygen for 2 months. I have 30% lung damage now.
Oh my gosh.
And so, like, in a conversation, you'll see me like, sometimes they have to re-expand my lungs. I had to do a 6-month pulmonary rehabilitation program to get the capacity back in my lungs.
Did you think you were going to die?
Oh, 100%. It was the worst. Man, I cried for 15 seconds total the entire time I was sick, because I was thinking, all I cared about was my kids. I didn't care about anything else except for I'm going to miss their careers, and they're going to have to do it without me. And I had been, I'm all in on them.
Oh, yeah.
So it was very difficult. I had to do my will while I was in the hospital, because I didn't have one.
Well,
I had to do everything at that point. And Lucas was home with COVID at the same time, and his mom was out of town. So I'm worried about him. Tyler, when I got sick, Tyler was home, and he goes, I'm going back to school. He didn't want to get it. So he took off, went back to school, and never got it. He still never got it.
Wow.
And his whole team had it, but he never got it. But I'm worried about Lucas, so I'm trying to message him, see how he's doing. I finally get out of the hospital and come home, and it was a rough time. Like, I didn't understand everything with the oxygen. So they gave me a tank to go home on and a phone number, and said, these people will bring you a machine.
Yeah.
And so you'll have 3 hours on this tank. And the machine wasn't there for 4 hours. I'm freaking out on, trying to breathe. And so at that point in time, it was so hard to get in anywhere. And they told me I need to see a pulmonologist.
Yeah.
So I make an appointment 3 months out. And I'm super damaged lungs. And when they saw the CT in my lungs, like, doctors kept coming. They're like, you're the first person we've seen fit like you are that's this sick. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. I'll winter here too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was that Delta version. It was bad. Yeah. And so I started searching online for something. And I found an online pulmonary rehabilitation program that was a class that went through everything. And this thing was called, to get back to you on that. But the guy, his name was Alex, who was just an awesome person, was the respiratory therapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday for an hour and a half in front of a camera on a tripod. And I learned more in those 6 months than I did my entire 9 years of going to school. Like, I was all in. I was paying attention. I studied and learned about all of this like I do jiu-jitsu. Like, I was, it was a life or death thing.
Yeah.
I was not going to be not able to function, right? I was going to figure it out. And so I had to send them my CT, And the pulmonologist there was like, no, okay. He goes, we're going to get you this back. You're never going to be 100%.
Wow.
And that's still the case with everyone I've talked to.
Yeah.
When I finally got to see the pulmonologist here, he walks in, he's looking at the CT, and he goes, "This is you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And this is 3 months in, and he goes, "Man," typically I see one this bad, they're not alive. I was like, "Wow, that's what I've heard." And so he was surprised how good I looked. But I had already been 3 months into this program that I was busting my butt on, and doing all the breathing exercises and everything. And still, again, I can breathe, and my oxygen stays. I can't fly. If I fly, I would have to be on oxygen because I've flown twice and it crashes to 84. And I did a test flight to Houston to see if I could fly after I had, been couple of years, and I had to and breathe the way I learned to breathe just to keep my oxygen levels up without being on oxygen. And it was exhausting, right? So I'm not gonna, like, I could fly an hour or something, but otherwise it was not worth it. So I put 100,000 miles on my car in 3 years, going to Lucas's fights and all of Tyler's wrestling matches. And I don't care. I don't mind.
Sure.
I think I missed one of Tyler's wrestling matches last year, but I went from the East Coast to the West Coast to North Dakota to back here. And he's got one more season, so I'm going to do it one more time. A little worried about Lucas being in the UFC because I'll have to fly it at some point there for sure. It won't always be in the United States, so I'll have to, and it'll be on oxygen. But I've learned that I won't wait until my oxygen is down and I'm not feeling good to put it on. I'll just put it on. I don't feel like a guy that should be on oxygen, so I don't want to be on a plane.
You don't look like a guy that
I'd rather be on a private jet on oxygen so no one else would see.
There you go.
But
So quick question, spiritually speaking, having that, and listen, you talked about you went to Brazil, you saw some crazy stuff over there, you've seen people be shot. You've been around some serious stuff, man. But you yourself are thinking you're going to die. Did that change you in any way, like spiritually with God?
So that's the day that I've prayed every day since that day.
Amen.
Come on, bro.
On days I feel 100%, I don't forget.
Amen.
And so, yes, I it definitely changed me.
Yeah.
And most of the people in here will tell you too. I think a lot of guys think that I'm a lot softer now. Not as hard around the edges. I'll still, pop off when need be, but it definitely changed a lot. Calmed my personality down, I guess, a little bit. Neater, a little more caring. I was always that way about my kids, but I just feel like I'm a little more chill, and there's no question. There have been some things. Not to get religious, and I'm sure there are people who would look at me like, "Why, you pray every day?" But I do, and there are some things that have happened in these 3 years that I 100% believe was a miracle, no question. Within minutes after praying, minutes after praying,
that's a good thing.
and I'm just like, "Holy smokes, man! Like, what the heck?" But yeah, I mean, it definitely did a number on me, and it changed me that direction, no question.
We're talking about making him a champion, and I'm just gonna say it: the ultimate champion was Jesus. And was he a bad dude? Yeah, he walked with massive authority. I mean, he had the authority of a legion of angels at his beck and call, but it was also gentle and safe. He was a protector, and you have those qualities.
Mm-hmm.
You have those qualities. But wow,
he's a good father.
That's an amazing story.
I want to piggyback just real quick because you talked about your boys, and I know you're very proud of them, and they've both accomplished amazing things in their lives.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about their lives, what they got going on.
Man, so when I retired from MMA, I started competing. Everyone's asking, jiu-jitsu tournaments going? I was like, sure. So I retired in 2012. And then I won the world championships 2013, 14, and 15.
Wow.
Right after I retired. My kids started training around that time. I had opened my gym. Oh, yeah. So they start training at the end of 2011 to beginning of 2000.
And how old are they at this time?
10, 11.
10 and 11.
Yeah. So they were late, kind of. It's young, but still late for some of the kids they had to compete against here. They were late. And, but the fact that they only did no gi and everyone else did gi and no gi, they caught up twice as fast and they were good to go within the first year.
Yeah.
And so I competed. So I had 2 fights left. And right when my kids started training, I hadn't fought in a couple of years. And I was up in the air on what my plan was, And I opened my gym here and I wanted them to see me fight in person. They'd seen me on TV, they'd seen videos, they'd seen it, but they'd never seen me fight in person.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to see me fight in person since they were training now. And I made them start training for self-defense reasons. Like Lucas for sure would have been bullied,
Yeah.
He was just a soft, quiet kid, artist, and Tyler was a good athlete, but still just a skinny little kid. Yeah. So I made them start for that reason. That I told them, you're going to train a couple days a week,
I did the same thing with my son for the same reason.
Yeah. And by the time they realize they don't like it, they're already good enough. So cool.
Yeah.
At least you'll have something.
Yeah.
So I got them to start training and they got to see me fight 2 more times. I won both of my fights. They got to be right there, basically cage side for the fights. That's and awesome. Then I could see how into it they were. So I retired.
Was that King of the Cage?
Yeah. My last 2 were King of the Cage here at Wingstar, where Lucas's first professional fight was.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. Awesome. And then his first big Bellator fight in an arena was a Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, where my last UFC fight was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was super cool. So I got them, once I realized that this is what they wanted to do, I stopped competing and just went all in on them. And we did a couple tournaments together, and then I stopped and just constantly focused on them. And
I'm going to ask you a question, because you raised a couple of champions, but you also raised some killers. These kids they know they know how to inflict some pain on somebody.
Sure.
So as boys, there's a pecking order when they're in high school, junior high, and they weren't massive kids, they weren't big kids. So there's probably some kids that probably tried to screw with them. What advice did you give your boys when it came to being bullied or seeing somebody being bullied? Because there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that kind of ability.
They really did not get messed with. Fortunately, they had done jiu-jitsu before we got to high school, and were already very good. And they made a reputation for themselves in Texas, to where it was very cool. We would show up to tournaments and we would have parents tell their kids, there's the Brennan brothers right there. Or
some people knew, don't mess with kid boys.
Yeah. Or there would be kids that tell their parents.
Yeah.
Or we'd be walking to the mat for Tyler to compete, and this dad would be sitting with his kid that's about to compete against Tyler, watching a video of Tyler, before he goes out. It was like, man, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And so they didn't get messed with. And when we showed up to, I forget what the day was called, but where you go in and all the sports are in the gym room.
Right.
And there was the wrestling line, and we were walking towards the wrestling line, and the coach looked at me, he goes, I knew they were coming to Frisco. I just didn't know what high school they were going to come to. Are they coming here? And I was like, yes. And he was just like, oh my gosh.
Best day ever.
They had never wrestled yet. They had just started wrestling. So I had Kendall Cross, who's an Olympic gold medalist, coaching at my gym.
Yeah. And
they had just started with him and when high school started.
Wow.
And so he was their coach after school. And then another guy named Rick Delegata, who was a phenomenal wrestler on our 80 Olympic team. And so they were good at wrestling right when they started.
Yeah.
They used some funky jiu-jitsu in their wrestling, and coaches couldn't coach the guys against them.
That's awesome.
First for some of the things they were doing. And so they're very humble, very quiet, very low, low key.
Did they
Funny,
ever, did they never have fights outside?
Nope.
That's what I'm talking about.
There you go. Yeah.
Lucas's first fight was against a 26-year-old man with a wife and a kid in the cage. And his first amateur, he was 17 years old, a week before his senior year in high school.
Kind of like Joe Stevenson.
Yes.
Wow.
Just like that. Yeah, he was 17.
Did he win?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unlike Joe Stevenson.
For
I know. Yeah.
years. Yeah.
Yep.
He won that. And then he won again a week before his senior year started. And a week before his senior year ended. And then half a year went by and he fought in Vegas at Tough Enough. And Bellator signed him right there. 5 weeks later, he made his debut at Bellator at 19.
Wow. That's amazing. He's done a great job raising your boys just from hearing and seeing everything about their life. Like, I mean, that's amazing, really.
I feel like I was, number one, I'm lucky that they decided to do what I do.
Yeah.
Right. That's number one. It's rarely for anybody as it is, but let alone all three people in the same household.
Right.
And so when they decided to do it, I would support them, whether it was art, baseball, football, soccer, whatever.
Yeah.
But now I also knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
So I was 8 and I'd already been through so much with promoters trying to burn me, with students trying to burn, with everything. And I feel like the street smarts background that I had was so much for what I do, so much better than having a school education for what I had to deal with in life.
That's true in a lot of businesses, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I mean, there's a lot of business owners that didn't go to school that hire the people coming out of college. Right?
Yep.
A lot of them.
I want to ask you a quick question. So there's a fight that you have, and you do a head kick on this guy. Forget what his name is. That's what and just, I mean, he's out. He's out. And the audience is kind of like, everybody's kind of freaking out a little bit. He goes out on a stretcher. I see you come over and you kind of have your hands like this. What were you saying? You remember what you were saying?
not as polite as you would think, only because, and I was cool with the guys that I fought, but this guy, we get along now, but this guy, I was on the scale and he comes over and knocks me off the scale and steps on the scale and asks me if let's fight winner takes all. Well, I'm the champ at the time, so I know I'm making more than he is, but I'm like, let's go. Okay. They talked a lot of trash. King of the Cage brought me in to get beat by Joe Stevenson.
Yeah.
Okay. He was their
college child. Yeah.
And I choked him to sleep.
Yep.
And his coach had been calling me, telling me that he was the next UFC champion. He was going to run me over.
Yeah.
It takes him 10 minutes to beat him, and he's 280 pounds. And then Joe was calling me, telling me he was going to hook up with my wife.
Yeah.
Oh,
gosh.
And I'm training with Marco Huas at the time, who was the UFC 7 champion and the ultimate champion heavyweight.
Yeah.
And I go, what do I do? He goes, whatever you catch, don't let go. I said, okay. So he's lucky it wasn't an arm. So I catch him in a triangle and I put him to sleep.
Yeah.
And the crowd's booing me because he had already fought there and he was young.
He's a crowd favorite.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so I beat him. And they invite me back on the next one to fight Antonio McKee, who was also undefeated. He was a stud wrestler. Yeah. And I was losing. He'd take me down the first round.
Yeah.
Wrestle me the first round, and I couldn't get anything going. And he's driving my head into there's a bolt in the back of the fence. This cage was in Joe Stevenson's gym at the time.
Yeah.
And Joe Stevenson and this guy trained together under the same coach, Ted Williams.
So they knew where those hard spots were.
And this gym, that cage ended up in my gym after that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. For years. So he's banging my head on this thing. So I take my hand from the side of his head and I go to his eyeball, basically, and shove his face away with it to sweep for an armbar. And he complains that your eye gouging as though you're banging my head off a bolt that's facing inside the cage. Right. So the round ends and I go back to my corner. And the ref comes over to yell at me about the eye gouge. I was like, well, tell him to quit banging my head out the thing. And I look at my student, Jeremy, and I was like, what do I do? Like, we heard this guy. So
you had a T-shirt on.
I fought him a T-shirt because he supposedly had been trained with a lot of good black belts and no one can submit him. They said he feels like he's slick like Vaseline every time.
Yeah.
And right before I walked out, I'm panicking. And
you don't even have you're like your student in your corner. You didn't have an actual coach.
I never had a coach.
That is so
They're
crazy.
always my students.
Yeah.
So I tell him, I'm panicking before I walk out. I said, I had too many yes men around me.
Yeah.
I was the boss.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And I said, bro, what do you think if I fight with a shirt on and absorb his sweat so I could be a little stickier? And now I'm ruining my no-gi thing because that's the point of the gi. And I go, he goes, yeah, sure.
He's like, yeah, sure. Leave it.
How'd I know I was going to have a world-class head kick knockout of him not have had a shirt on?
Yeah, you want to show off the abs.
So the guy comes over to me, he goes, and he's yelling at me. Then I go to my student, I'm like, what should I do? He goes, knock him out. And it sounds funny, but leading up to this fight, I had head kick drop multiple people, and it wasn't even my style. Yeah. But I'd also gotten kicked in the head the week before this and had a concussion.
Mm.
And I'd only had, not like a nauseous concussion, I had a 20 to 30 minute period of time of training that I still don't remember.
Wow.
You know? And so I go, okay. And 9 seconds into the round, I had kick knocked him
In
out.
the second round?
9 seconds in.
If we can pull that up whenever we show this.
And then I went over,
It's brutal.
and then I was like, I went to say, where's the, let's make sure it's where it takes all, right? And I realized how bad he was.
Yeah.
And then his wife had come down and was like literally at the cage freaking out. And my wife never watched me fight again after that. Like she was there. And even though I won, any fight she was at, her head was down.
Wow.
She did not watch me fight again after that. And she's the same way with Lucas now. But
So you go over to him.
yeah. And I was gonna trash talk him, but I did.
You saw
But
how bad it was.
yeah. And then he got on the stretcher, but my students did. Like as he's awake in a neck brace being wheeled out, they're yelling, "That's what happens when you ref with Next Generation."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
And
so- I later, this is how, like I'm telling you, I am cool with the guys that fight. I later had him and Joe Stevenson at the same time in Big Bear with me, helping me get ready for another fight.
Wrestle cool.
Yeah. And
Right.
then later on, Antonio was on that Lights Out podcast talking about he had a gun and was coming to kill me after that. He literally he had a friend find out where I lived and he was going to come. He freaked out. He was undefeated and hadn't lost really
The guy that you
anything.
had kicked
Yeah.
decides he's going to come kill you.
Yeah. And he had not, he said he didn't leave his place, for a month. And
He was so traumatized by
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Wow.
And it's crazy because he had other losses after me,
Yeah.
but he is a stud.
Yeah.
His kid is a super stud. His kid is 21-1 in Bellator.
Oh, wow.
And our first day in Bellator, everyone's like, "What do you think about Lucas and AJ McKee?" I was like, "Bro, he's 15-0, and Lucas is making his debut tonight. Like,
Right.
get out of here.
Yeah.
Like, stop.
Quit it.
First of all, it's not Lucas's personality. I would have, had it been me at the time, like, I fought Pat Miletich, who was 15 or 16-0 at the time, and I'm making he was my fourth fight.
Yeah.
And, but I just was different, right? I was, came up different.
You're wired different.
And I brought them up not having to be that way.
Yeah.
Kind of not realizing they were going to fight. So it would be cool if sometimes they were that way, but I much prefer their personality the way it is and just have to drag that out of them. And so, so that guy's kid is also a stud. So it was weird that he was so upset. He ended up thinking that someone put GHB in his water in between round 1 and round 2. I was like, bro, does it work in 9 seconds?
Yeah.
I was like, so
he just geeked out.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cool. I got TKO'd by a guy. My hands were up and I got hit in the temple and I leaned against the fence and then I put my hands down and I stood up. The ref had stopped the fight and I was asking the ref, who was a friend of mine. I said, are you giving him a foul? And he goes, what? Are you giving a foul? He goes, no. He goes, shh, what are you talking about? I was like, never mind. He goes, watch a Jumbotron. And after the right hand, it hit me 22 times.
Wow.
And I was going, bing, 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 bing.
Oh
And I
my
dropped my
God.
foot, put my hands down. And I was like, what's up? 100% fine. No marks on my face.
Yeah.
But
you're
a memory
out-
gap of 15 seconds that I never got
on your
back.
feet.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for you. Going into the octagon, right? I mean, I watch guys like you going. I watch that cage shut, right? I mean, I honestly can't imagine that, right? I mean, looking across at a guy that's like,
Trained to kill you.
I want to hurt
Yeah.
you. Right? But I think there's some life application. You got to enter the cage. You got to step on the battlefield. You got to enter into the business or whatever it is. talk to us about the mentality of entering that cage and what's processing and kind of what's happening in your mind and how you have to be prepared to perform and to be a champion in that setting.
So for me, I was never worried about being hurt, being injured. I was always worried about losing. I was so much pressure to not lose because I had my gym and my students were all there. And in my head, if I lose, no one's going to be in class on Monday. Everyone's going to cancel the membership, right? I mean, like that was all that ever crossed my mind. I was always worried about that. And so much that I ended up seeing a sports psychologist for it during my fighting career because I didn't care about anything else but that. And I would literally throw up backstage before I walked out just from fear of
The performance.
losing in front of everyone, performing and losing in front of everyone.
Wow.
And I think my son has that a little bit.
Mhm.
I don't think he's worried about getting hurt. He's good. He's great. He is a kid that is just great at the sport.
Yes.
He didn't come up the same way as me where I was just gnarly and I was tough and I got good.
Yeah.
He's just a wizard at the sport. And so I think he, worries about it as well. He had his first loss, he had a decision loss and it hit hard. It was just something that I had seen coming because he was, I could tell, a little burnout already, leading into the fight before the one he lost. And I was trying to drag it out of him and he didn't talk to me about it. And I could tell in his performance in the fight that so his fight before the one he lost, he had a huge knee knockout with 90 seconds left in the third round, but he lost everything up to that point.
Oh, wow.
And he had not lost a round before that. He was 8-0 with no rounds lost, had been hit 4 times in 8 fights.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in this fight, we're late in the third round. He can barely step on his leg because it had been kicked so many times by this fantastic fighter who's under Leona Machida. And he finds a way. He finds a way and knees this guy and flatlines him and then hammer fists him while he's on the ground. And stands up and walks away shaking his head, went sat in the corner. He and didn't even get to celebrate because he was already so worried about what's after this.
Right.
And I'm thinking, as I'm watching the fight, I'm like, there's 90 seconds left. Nothing's going to change. It's just going to end on a decision. We're going to lose.
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out the post-fight conversation, because at this point, Lucas has found he had lost some matches in jiu-jitsu. He had lost some matches in wrestling. But when we found out, put it all together, he hadn't lost anything in MMA.
Yeah.
And we didn't really talk about it before that. And I could see him kind of falling off before that fight. And I kept saying, I don't want to have this conversation with you walking back to the locker room after a loss.
Yeah.
Let's get it out now. And I'm fine. Third player. I said, okay. Gets that win and didn't really get to celebrate because he was so already again was feeling burnout.
Yeah.
And knew that beforehand, but didn't tell me.
Yeah.
But I could see it. And then before the last one, same thing. And he just didn't. We had a coach, phenomenal striking coach, and Lucas really was veered away from the jiu-jitsu and was striking. And his fights were, I didn't get a takedown, we're striking now. And it was still MMA where there was another shot, whatever, but it was just turned into a kickboxing match. And it just, it happened. It sucks because now he doesn't get the undefeated thing. But at the same time, I think it's a huge relief off of him that he doesn't have the undefeated thing. So I think that's good.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, that one, I went through a list and I sent him people from George St. Pierre to everybody had not gotten to pass 9 before their loss. Fedor lost to number 1, fight number 1, and then went on a run.
Yeah.
Dustin Poirier, all these guys had lost. Conor McGregor, all of them had lost before. Sure, 9-0 or at 9. rarely John Jones, I think, even John Jones's his disqualification loss is on Fight 10.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was the same fight. So I just said, man, like, look where they are still now,
Right.
you know, and here, and I said, and look how many losses I have. Look what we have.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're on a trajectory that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, this is a beep and go.
Right.
You know, so yeah, that was my thing. I was always fear of that. You know, and it hurts me so bad that I know that that's what's bothering him because I felt it. You know, and everyone will still love him. Everyone will still think he's cool. Yeah. Everyone will still come to his classes.
There you go.
He coaches wrestling here and has kids from every high school around here packed in this room every single night, coached by him, and they love him. And they would no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, it comes down to your character, right? I mean, if you to be a leader, you know, people are going to follow you, you know, even when you're not at your best, right? And that's the character and the champions that you've built in your sons, you know. But you know, what I was reminded of, somebody said this to me one time, it says, you know, your setback is just setting you up for your comebacks, you know. And, you know, we said this earlier, even on another podcast that we did recently, is whenever with our kids, you want to protect them. You want to take those hurts and those pains and that anxiety and those things away from them. But they can't have a great victory without a great battle. So they've got to win these battles. They've got to go through these life lessons and go through these things so that they can someday be better than us, right? So
to be a champion, you're going to go through some defeats, right? I'm sorry, boy.
So I was just going to say, you know, the hard times create strong men create good times. Yeah. Good times create weak men. I said, I am the good times that is creating the weak man. You know, not in the you're weak, but I'm creating the good times from being the hard guy. I want you to break that and just drag it out and continue, you know, to have the good times by being the hard guy, you know, and not be, you know, I did put him in a place where it was hard to fail, you know. He did all the work,
right?
You know, but I, for example, Tyler wanted to race motocross. 6 months in, we had 6 race bikes. Our garage was packed with everything it would take to win. Yeah. If you were going to lose, it wasn't because you didn't have everything. Right. It's because you didn't want to or you didn't perform. Yeah. You know, and same goes here. Like we have a hot tub, we have a cold plunge, we have a sauna, we have a treadmill, bike, rower, air, everything. Our house is like set up beyond, you know, and
it's to make champions.
It's frustrating to him sometimes. He's like, I hate that there's so many things we have to do. I was like, you don't have to do them.
Right.
You get to do them. Yeah. You know, and there's a ton of people who would like to do them, you know, that don't get to, you know, and so, you know, I just think he's going to be awesome.
You know, my son would say this, and I've told you this before, Merritt. My son, he didn't want to jump into the family business because he's like, I want to go build something on my own. I'm like, okay, cool, go do that. You know, and so he goes to college. I'm so proud of him. First one in our family to go to a D1 school and went to the Mays Business School, you know, blah, blah, graduates. And then he realizes freaking hard out here, you know? And so we're having a conversation. I'm like, hey, we had this opportunity to buy a school in Oklahoma, blah, blah, blah. And so I told him, I said before all this, I said, son, I said, if you join the family business, you're not getting all my stuff, but you can stand on my shoulders and start building.
Right.
Or you can start in that gutter over there on your own and start building. So where do you want to start building? So your sons are standing on your shoulders but they're still building. Right. They're still building, you know? And that's important for, I think, this generation to know.
Yeah, there was a thing that he said he didn't bother him, but it bothered me. Like his first couple fights in Bellator, the first minute of the fight, they're talking about me. You know what I mean? And then they'd start to talk about him. And I hated it. I'm like, God, you know, I just, and they started getting away from it. And my favorite thing was showing up in our locker room, had Lucas Brennan and then Chris Brennan and Rafael Casillas. My name was small under his name. And I was like, man, that's all I want. You know, I don't want, I know he has pressure because of me, you know, and I don't want him to have any pressure because of me. So I'm like, I wish they would stop, but he's already, I never went on a, if you count his amateur and pro career, I never went on a 12 fight win streak. You know what I mean? Like he hadn't been, he was flawless, you know? So like you already surpassed so many things and you will continue to, and that's the point. You know, that's the point.
That's right.
And then I'll be Lucas's dad.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to be.
That's right. That's good. I know we're running out of time.
Sorry, I always get
it's
a lot.
no,
No, brother, this has been awesome.
You're going
Do it again.
This has been my favorite podcast ever. Just FYI.
Well, listen, couple things as we wrap up. What are you working on? And then people that may be interested in connecting with you, Next Generation, kind of let's talk about that. But what are you currently working on? And then how can people get connected with you?
Man, everything I'm working on is always based on what my kids are doing. I'm Lucas is about to start fight camp. He's leaving next week to go to Paris to corner Victor Altamirano in the Paris UFC, one of my fighters.
And we're not talking about Paris, Texas.
No, Paris, France. He's going to France that corner in the UFC over there. And then he'll be back. His fight camp starts right then. And he'll fight December 15th. So that's what my next 3 months looks like.
Who's he fighting?
At Houston.
In Houston, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then Tyler's season starts in November.
Okay.
So I'll be all over the place, with Tyler. Always building my fighters here. I've got a solid fight team of guys now that are fighting, in Texas, Oklahoma. Obviously, guy fighting in France. We've got guys that are a few fights away from the UFC. We got guys that are brand new, working on their amateur career.
Yep.
And so that's where my focus is right now. Is I teach jiu-jitsu Monday through Thursday night with Lucas. We share the class every night, and I love it. And I can't wait till Tyler's home so he can do it with us. And then just coaching the guys in the morning. The rest of the time is my time.
Yeah. Like Tyler's wrestling in
Little Rock.
Yep. Awesome. So if you're a wrestling fan, watch his boy. He'll be wrestling what weight?
174.
174.
Tyler Brennan. Yeah, he's
Ranked. He's ranked what?
He was ranked 14th at the time last year.
Yeah.
This year he's going to come out being ranked as well, and he'll be ranked. His rank is just going to continue to get down to those lower numbers as the season goes on.
Amen. Awesome.
Well, listen, it's been a treat. We'll have to do this again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And Chris Brennan, guys, Next Generation MMA.com.
Follow me on Instagram, Chris Brennan, 3-time champ.
There you go. Okay.
No
All
problem.
right. Love you guys. We'll see you next time. 27-17. Peace out.
See you guys. Dude, that was freaking awesome.